Okay. So we're going to get started. One of our speakers, one of the panelists, hasn't shown up yet. But this is the second in a series of 3 panels on creativity on the Mother Road. I'm Larry Sklar. My business card says that I'm the Rainforest Ambassador. I'm an inventor and an academic entrepreneur. And it occurred to me as we were moving into 2026, the centennial of Route 66, that one way to talk about creativity on the Mother Road was to engage the community, tech people, and creative artists and find common ground and hopefully have something magical happen that would lead to economic development and community engagement. So what I'd like to do, since we have a small crowd, is to go around the room and have people introduce themselves before we get to the panelists.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sklar. My name is Gilberto Zamora. I'm the Director of Operations for an aerospace company. Ideas, engineering, and technology. We build computers for satellites. But my wife is an artist, and I'm an electrical engineer by background. So this is a very good place to make my brain work again.
Hi, my name is Tom Swiftledo. I actually work at the hospital, UNM Hospital. I do live on the road, East, and I would like to call myself a friend of Steve here. So I'm here to support and see exactly what we've got going on in the state. Really excited to see what this will come up with.
Centennial, I work for HB Construction. I am also call myself a friend of Steve's and working for him, and I'm excited to hear more about his art.
And I'm Sandy Johnson. I'm an architect and planner for UNM Hospital as well, and travel together. And I'm also a supporter of Steve and happy to see what everyone's going to talk about today.
Hey, I'm Rochelle Diaz. I am the graphic design manager at Visit Albuquerque. And we are gearing up and have been gearing up for a while now to celebrate the 66th centennial in a big way, and got all kind of fun things planned.
I'm Sally Fry, and I work here at UNM Rainforest Innovations as the disclosures coordinator.
Hi, I'm Joe Damkevich, and I'm an accountant. I was just interested in what was going on.
Hey everyone, Arlene Young. I'm the Director of Commercialization for UNM Rainforest Innovations. We work out of this building, and we're the Technology Transfer and Economic Development Office for the University of New Mexico. And we're also hosting events, so thank you for putting on this series.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frankie Hermosillo. I'm the Senior Economic Developer for the City of Albuquerque Economic Development Department. I'm personally just a big fan of Shawnee, so we're here to support her. And all of our businesses, I run our small business office. And so anything we can do to support businesses, creatives, and everything of that sort, we're here to learn more and support.
I'm Cecilia Vicente. I'm the Economic Development Specialist here at UNM Rainforest Innovations, and I've been working together with Larry to put this series on.
I am Greg Banninger, Senior Innovation Manager of Life Science here at the UNM Rainforest Innovations. So my main job is to try to license technology that comes out of UNM.
Hey, my name is Leva Freed. I'm the president of the Wheels Museum on the Rail Yards. My family came here in 1920. I owned the building next to the Chemo Theater. We were in business for 90 years downtown and very, very interested in what you're doing and very appreciative of the work of all of you to help our cities. Thank you very much.
Hi, Kim Jackson with the City of Albuquerque Small Business Office, along with Frankie with Economic Development. I'm here to provide information, resources, support, connections, and also fan of Shawnee's. So here to support that as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm an intern as well with the City of Albuquerque Economic Development Department, and along with Ken. And I'm just here to enjoy the experience.
I'm Juliet Jones, and I want to thank Larry and Johnny
At the last economic development, I was in, we need art, we need money for artists, and so I'm so appreciative. I'm your professional photographer, and I have beautiful, unique backdrops that can be used for events, galas, blah, blah, blah. So thank you so much for supporting the creative.
I'm Beverly Fraser. I actually work in business development and KRQE Media Group. I sit on the New Mexico Technology Council board and really looking for ways to collaborate. I also sit on the National Institute of Filmmaker board and the National Cultural Center board as well. So looking forward to learning more.
I'm Hannah Russford. I'm the technology marketing manager here at UNM Rainforest Innovations. So I help market all the research that comes out of the university, whether from faculty members or students. And then I also have a big role in the mountain bike community here as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Juliana Silva. I have a firm called Silva Strategies and I support coaches, creatives, and consultants to implement business systems and financial systems in their small businesses. I'm part of the Steve and Shani fan clubs, and I live with an artist who I will have introduce himself now.
My name is Damian Velasquez. I'm a furniture maker, welder, fabricator, and currently started a fiber laser cutting business.
I'm Rob Nietzsche. I came from Philadelphia. That's an economic development passion. That side as a customer. Now I'm working as an independent consultant of the manufacturing.
I'm Lisa Kutua. I'm president of UNM Rainforest Innovations. And I just want to make some remarks about the vision for Innovate ABQ, which is the 7-acre site that we're on here now, has always been the connections and collaborations between science, engineering, and art. So this series is an example of some of that work in that area, and I hope we can expand it. And thanks to Larry for spearheading this initiative. And I want to say I have some of Damien's great furniture in my house, so talk to him if you're interested.
Cecilia tells me that our third panelist is on her way. She had an emergency at work. Her name is Sharina Desai, and actually she is at the intersection of technology and creative arts. She is director of a core facility in biomedical research, but she also does art and sells art in the community. So looking forward to her arrival. So I'll start now with the two panelists who are here. Shani Harvey, who is with State Creative Development Department, and she'll introduce herself. And Stephen Mora, who is an architect and fabricator. And there was one other term that you used. Artist. Art. Well, let's see what you wrote. So the first question really is to introduce yourself, talk about your work, how you incorporate creativity and technology in your work.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harvey with the Creative Industries Division, which is part of the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And Juliet, great to see you. Thanks for saying hi, Leva, and thank you to my fans, Ken and Frankie. Now I feel put on the spot and potentially not fully prepared. So the work that we're doing at the Creative Industries Division for New Mexico is really about putting light and awareness on the amount of creative economy work going on throughout the state of New Mexico. The creative economy is responsible for over $6 billion in annual economic revenue for the state, and that's only based on GRT income. So about 12% of registered GRT paying businesses in the state of New Mexico are considered creative establishments, but that doesn't actually include all the folks who might be tax exempt who aren't paying into GRT, other artists who might be practicing a creative practice on the side, folks who don't have a formally registered business. So those are just the numbers that we can pull from the data that's available. We know that creativity is innate to New Mexico. It's something that so many of our residents are naturally in tune with, naturally connected to. And a lot of our work goes around supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs who are in the creative industries, but also looking at supporting companies and workers that help with workforce development and other pieces of the creative economy work. So the way that UNM Rainforest is bringing folks together here today, they also do workshops and training. Wes, right here down the street, also does business development work. So supporting those folks in getting better connected with creatives, referring creatives to their programming. And then we also work with local governments and municipalities, as well as nations, tribes, and pueblos to help build creative industries infrastructure. So when you're thinking about outdoor event spaces, spaces like the Wheels Museum here located in Albuquerque, these are creative infrastructure, right? They're doing some sort of development, some sort of project that's taking creative industries, creative work, but also building it. So I'll wait on my, I guess, right? We're too early in the conversation. So some of the way that we're seeing creativity and technology merge, at least within the Economic Development Department, is that the Creative Industries Division covers over 115 different NAICS codes and 20-something different industry areas, which also include computer systems design and coding and software design. So with the new Tech and Innovation Office, we're actually seeing a lot of overlap in folks that are looking for service and support, because creativity and innovation are kind of two in the same words, right? When people think creative economy, they instantly think artists, and sometimes they think that scientists and engineers don't fall into that, but that's completely incorrect, because it takes creative thought and work in order to bring some of those developments to life. When we're seeing scientific and medical developments and technology, there's a creative process that goes behind that. So for creative economy for New Mexico, it also encompasses that work. So we're definitely seeing a lot of crossover, and the creative economy is also something that's very broad and difficult to define. So we're also still kind of learning as we go. And then we've been merging that in a lot of different ways. My staff is a team of two, me plus one. So we definitely are taking advantage of all the technology out there to help us get our creative work done. So whether that's doing events management, program management, grants coordination, we definitely see a lot of work in increasing our productivity.
My name is Steve Mora. I'm an architect here in Albuquerque, a registered architect in New Mexico. I'm born and raised in New Mexico, and I've been practicing architecture for about 20 years. I worked for CSR Architects. I've been there for about 14 years. I taught at UNM in the School of Architecture and Planning for about 11 years. Taught design studios, seminars, and also fabrication courses during that time. In addition to being an architect and a fabricator, I'm also an artist. That's a little bit more difficult to quantify, but I have some examples that I'll be showing here in a little bit of what I've brought to show today. And I just want to thank Lisa, Larry, and Cecilia for putting something like this on. I think it's really exciting to see everybody come together, and even in some of the early conversations with the artwork that I brought, it was really interesting to kind of hear some backstory from other people that had experiences thinking about artwork like that and stuff. So it was really kind of cool to see how art and the creative world kind of bring different worlds together in really unique ways. So yeah. Did I answer?
So our third panelist has arrived. Karina,
Hello. I apologize.
you're actually just in time. Your turn to talk. And what you're going to talk about is introducing yourself and your work, and how you've incorporated creativity and technology into what you do. And so I've told everyone that you work both in STEM, in biomedical research, and that you're an artist. And so you'll have a unique perspective for our panel.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience. emergencies at the lab. So as Dr. Scalar was mentioning, I have a background in molecular cell and developmental biology. I did a postdoc at the UNM Cancer Center looking at T-cell trafficking, and I kind of use all those skills to run a core facility where we use microscopes and other instruments for looking at metabolism, autophagy, and inflammation. At my spare time, all of the fun artistic things I do. About 3 years ago, I started a small side company making earrings. It originally started with finding beautifully anatomically correct printed paper that looked like butterflies. And I just made them for fun for my friends and family, and then we said, people want to make more. So I did. I started with a variety of 12, and now I'm up to a variety of 400. I've been invited by a conservatory in Florida who wants to carry my line. They're a butterfly conservatory. I've been invited to a couple of the Albuquerque open spaces for their pollinator season, and several other beautifully booked things. I'm at the Downtown Growers Market, at Art Walk, and several other venues. Partnered with a few other artists, events and displays for making our own jewelry, like handmade things. Artistically, I've also been a Latin dancer for 25 years. So you might see me on the dance floor. And that's also another form of expression. And it's, you know, at some point for earrings, I'm also a fiber artist. So I would make crocheted items. I sold a lot of them to raise money for NICU patients. I'm proud mother of 3 NICU babies. So it's kind of a mixture of both. And it's nice. One weekend at the Downtown Growers Market, I think it was a convention of entomologists, and 3 came to my booth, entomologists, bug experts. And they came and they looked at the stuff very carefully. And and they looked at the back. Oh, you've included the species name. Yes, and common name and native territory. Well done. Well, one time, and it was really sweet, this lady came up to me. I'm from Cuba. You got any Cuban butterflies? And I'm like, hold on, sis. Yes, we do, right this way. So it's been a point of pride that a lot of the intersections of the creative part of me can be melded very well with the scientific side. Same thing when I show people how to run microscopes. There's art in it. There's beauty in that. So it's kind of both. You know, all these photographers, they know more about optics and lenses than mostly anybody I've known, right? So it's a beautiful intersection of the world. Thank you for your time.
So did you bring pictures to show? So do you want to talk about, you've talked about your current projects. Do you want to talk about some of the technical tools that you use? Where did you first do it? Technical tools in your art or in technology?
So for the scientific side of my day, as I said, it's a lot of microscopy, right? And the microscopic world is beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the scales on a butterfly's wings. They're fantastic. Or did you know that the center of a flower, they take 2 flowers and they look exactly the same. But if you look at it with polarized light, the other one has a bullseye target. And these are things that animals and insects can see, right? And shows differentiation. So I'm a lover of microscopes. I'm a lover of fluorescent technology. And that also, you know, it comes from nature, right? So green fluorescent protein is something that scientists use the world over. And we borrowed that gene from a jellyfish. And then we also use luciferase, which we borrowed from fireflies, right? And I was fortunate enough to actually take a firefly tour in a mangrove forest this summer. And it was the most spiritual thing. Sorry if it's diverging. a moonless night in a mangrove forest on a quiet boat. And I couldn't tell the difference between the sky, the forest, and the water. That's how dark it was. And then if you just adjust your eyes and you look, out of every 50 trees, only 2 are flowering on any given night in the mangrove forest. And that flowering tree is where all the fireflies will just sit on, and they're twinkling like Christmas lights. And then if you shine a red light on them, it represents, or it mimics the red light that shines from a predator's eyes. So the tour guide lit up his little flashlight, and the whole thing just burst into a flame of color, and it made me want to cry. And it's because fireflies synchronize their light to look bigger. And it's complete darkness. You shine the light and it was amazing. And you couldn't take a picture of it. And I had a talk with the tour guide afterward that I was like, do you know in my science lab, we use luciferase all the time for this. And so there is a beautiful melding of science and art. Right now, I'm really I'm taking a deep dive into origami artists and engineers and how they use origami folding to actually predict certain array scatters of things and also how to compact things in nature. I know that there's a company that's using the proboscis of a mosquito to design a less painful syringe. Because if you've ever noticed, you don't notice the mosquito has bitten you until you feel itchy, right? And yet the mosquito's tiny little proboscis can penetrate and actually look for and heat seek your vessel. So there's, as a biologist, I think you want to tell me more about that, but there's so much intersection between art and science and nature, and so I'm the biggest advocate for that. So microscopes are my thing, fluorescence is my thing. Imaging is my thing, and now the new cutting edge in 2026 is how to take all that information and not just look at the photo, but quantify the intensity, the area, the location, the shape, and be able to tell you in numbers, this cell is very different from this cancer cell in all these ways that weren't possible before AI and machine learning. So yeah, come at me later for more fun facts.
So, Stephen, this is your opportunity to share some pictures of your current projects and the technical tools that you use in creativity.
Thank you. You do a fantastic job of painting a picture with your words. That was amazing. I need a lot of pictures, so I've got a lot of pictures and hopefully it's not too many. But really, when I was invited to be a part of this panel, the artwork that I do is centered around lowrider art. So it's what you would find on a vehicle, traveling down the street. And I've shifted and moved it into a gallery. But I started thinking, well, why am I part of a STEM talk for that? How do I make this more STEMmy? So I think the word that keeps popping around is intersection. And so I found, how did I get here? Where am I? What am I doing? And it all comes from different intersections of, my professional life and artistic life and creative interests. So hopefully this can really kind of paint that picture. So again, I mentioned I'm an architect, and I've kind of loosely titled some of this like art, architecture, and automobiles. Really, I'm going to carry through things very quickly just to try and get to a point of how I've arrived at what I'm working on currently.
Up and left.
So as I mentioned, I'm an architect. I work with CSR architects, and we've developed a lot of projects throughout Albuquerque and throughout New Mexico. This one actually happens to be up near the East Mountains right off of Central, off the Mother Road. I won't get into specifics about the project necessarily, but a lot of my art borrows from some of the concepts that I've learned in education and also in the profession of architecture. Here's the team at the office. It's always a team effort in any of these avenues, art, fabrication, everything that I'll talk about. Always requires a team effort. But some of the spaces that we design, we think about composition, we think about light and shadow, we think about different ways that we can really enhance a space that we occupy. We'll think about how we can create a rhythm or repetition through a space to really kind of make it inviting to walk through and to be a part of. We look at the material that we apply and think how we can create tension between those materials, like the formed concrete and the white gypsum. How we can really kind of narrate a space as you occupy it. Here's a shade structure that we worked on, looking at how do we create texture, how do we create patterns, looking at positive and negative space in the structure itself. In doing so, we use a lot of different tools professionally. We use, different 3D modeling tools. We use building information modeling, BIM. We use CAD, computer-aided drafting, and other visualization tools. In some cases, we use them to develop a project and to really kind of assess its performance. And then in other areas, we'll use them as a way to represent an idea to a client or a consultant. So you'll see that up at the top here. In any way, we try to work to create something beautiful and something long-lasting that the owner and the client and the community can really kind of stand behind and be proud of. So taking a step forward into the vehicular world, now no longer kind of thinking about it as a static building, but kind of thinking about, okay, what about mobile architecture? I had the opportunity to work on a project when I was at the School of Architecture and Planning. We developed mobile makerspace for the Air Force Research Lab, which was, we were tasked with developing an existing trailer and building it out to be a mobile STEM lab that they could deploy around New Mexico and take it to rural areas to be able to deliver STEM education to some of the students and communities that don't have access to the technology or the equipment. I do want to say, in this case, some of the digital tools that we use, they were used as a way to communicate an idea, but because we fabricated this, we also used those digital models as a way to cut and fabricate the project itself. So it was kind of a dual purpose thing. Here's the finalized Maker Lab, and on the side here you can see all the equipment that we housed in it. It had a CNC router, laser cutter, 3D printer, and a robotic station. And you can see it, in action at a few STEM events, and it was wildly popular. We liked the idea that the tool that it housed also sort of made it. It became kind of a living classroom in that way, and very inspiring for the kids. And so that was kind of a real exciting project for us. Now shifting a little bit farther into just automobiles, this is normally a set of projects that I would not talk about in front of a group. This is kind of my pet project that's, you hide from everybody, but I think it's a critical piece in how I get to where I'm going with this, with what we're looking at. So on the left is a 1955 Chevy truck, which is mine. I've restored everything underneath. It's all modernized. All of the infrastructure is modernized, but the exterior still has the original patina. So it's really kind of a nice vehicle to drive. And then on the right, you'll see a 1963 Impala. That was actually what we call a parts car. So it was on its way to the scrapyard, and I was able to salvage it for a vehicle that I'm actually building. I am building a 63 Impala, but it had a lot of the sheet metal and a lot of the parts that I needed to be able to build my car. So I went ahead and kind of cut away at it and took all the material that I needed before it hit the salvage yard. On the right there, you'll see the rear fenders, they were actually in really nice shape, and I didn't need fenders for my car, but I thought, those are a little bit nice, and I don't know, I got a little idea. So I cut the fenders off, and you can see one down at the bottom. I turned it into a canvas for some of the artwork that I create, and you'll see that here in a little bit once it's completed. And so then to get to the artwork, and I think this is, really why I'm here, was, the artwork was what kind of brought me to this conversation. So, being born and raised in New Mexico, I've just had a lifelong affinity for a lowrider, and I've always been artistic and a creative, and something about the paint jobs, the way that they are just so unique, and they're just as individual as a person, and trying to capture that has just been an effort of mine. So every paint job that I paint and every piece of art that I paint, I really try to capture that feeling of seeing the vehicle on the street and really kind of capturing that unique piece of pride that we all see. And even in some of the early conversations when I got here today, there was conversation of walking up and down Central, seeing how the community responds to these types of vehicles, seeing how the owners really kind of light up and show that kind of pride. And I think there's just something difficult to quantify what's so spectacular about, that sort of thing. And so that's the entire effort, is sort of a grasp at trying to capture that through art. In a lot of ways, the technology that's used here is very low tech. It's just a lot of tape and razor blades and airbrushes and paint remover. But each one tries to capture, a different aesthetic of a vehicle that I may have seen or can already imagine. Here, I start to kind of tweak and adjust my process a little bit. I've taken some of the digital tools that we use in architecture, some of the CAD tools, and I actually drafted and then CNC cut out some stencils and used that to do some of the scroll work. So really kind of hybridizing some of the processes that I've learned professionally and embedding that into some of the artwork. And you'll see that in a few of these others that we show here. This one, I didn't think about that it'd be right next to its own slide, but sorry about that. But you can see, some of the scroll work and the pinstriping that's in the gold leafing, that was all done digitally. I drew it by hand first, and then went ahead, digitized it, and kind of, tried to introduce a level of technology into the lowrider paint job. And so here's the final result of that quarter panel that came off the parts car. And that was, most of these have all been housed at a gallery. I've shown at a few galleries around New Mexico, but primarily show at Office Room down in Old Town. And they currently have this on display right now, although it's already sold. But really just trying to capture, what it would look like if you were in a gallery and you saw that vehicle. Because I think, for too long, the lowrider, the art of the lowrider has been street art, and it's not been fine art. And I think it's fine art. So talking about the Centennial of the Route 66, the history of the Route 66 and the Centennial. I worked with an artist. He was the one who was my mentor, and he gave me a lot of the tools and techniques to be able to do what I do. His name is Rob Vanderslice. If you're familiar with lowriders, you're familiar with him. He's world renowned for his artwork, and he's here locally and just does a complete sweet art. But he was tasked with designing and painting a Route 66 sign for the Centennial, and the city provided the upper left image there. And they said, can you provide a rendering of what you might perform on a piece of art? And so he reached out, and he knew that that's kind of what I do professionally. And so I digitally modeled the same model and then rendered it, and we sent it in just to make sure that he could get the commission. He ended up then putting a team of artists together to accomplish it. And so here you can see we just went at it, and we started laying layers of tape. You can see where it says route for the Route 66, and then also some of the scroll work that was all digitally stenciled. I drew in CAD, developed it through some of the architectural tools that I use, and then we moved forward with that. And so here you can see up in I think there's a small screen in front of it, but I typically draw something by hand, then I would take it into CAD, digitize it, and then work with an airbrush over the top to really kind of get depth and textures and that sort of thing. And then ultimately that's how it turned out, and it was recently installed. And we're thrilled about it, and think that it turned out very unique. It also has in a lot of different ways, if you know about the lowrider paint job, different eras and styles and techniques of paint. So I'd say from the 80s to the 90s to now, you'll see different techniques. And if you actually are familiar with that, then you'll see that kind of embedded in the artwork. So it turned out fantastic. We're really thrilled about it. So then that leads me to the newest project, which is currently underway. Again, working with Rob Vanderslight, there was a call for art to install suspended artwork in the T connector as the sun port. And he brought us on, assembled a team, and then we created, and basically at this point, this is where I don't know what I'm doing, but I had to model an airplane, render an airplane, design the airplane, make it a lowrider, and then paint those digital lowrider airplanes. So it is really an exciting space to be in when you're not really sure what's going to come of it. But we actually were awarded the contract, and so we're going to hang 5 or 6 airplanes at the T connector, one full size, a few half scale, a few quarter scale, and I think the smaller ones are actually going to be. I'm going to have to develop the models a little bit farther because we're going to 3D print them and then paint them. So it's really kind of there's a little bit of STEM right there for everybody. So again, a team effort on this one to be able to put it together. We did a small mock-up for the interview to really kind of if you want to afterwards take a look at the artwork up close. It's really until you see it in person, it's hard to get a grasp of the depth to the artwork. And then just some behind the scenes of the digital, modeling of the airplanes here. But like I said, I had to model an airplane, make it a lowrider, and paint it all digitally, which was very exciting. And I have just a short video if we can jump to that. I told you I needed a lot of pictures.
Is there a year when something becomes a low rider? Does it have to be like 20 years, 50 years?
No, most of them you'll see are usually classics. I think that's just through the culture of lowriding and seeing. In a lot of ways, it's what was available. So there's a resourcefulness to it. If your grandpa had a certain version of a vehicle, that might be the vehicle that you move forward with. But I see them right off the lot. If you just throw a set of wire wheels on it, it's older.
Robert Espinola?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was just a short brief of the video we put together for the interview and the extension for that.
Was that an art that you all got selected for the call? Congratulations. It's just there's so much spec and design work that goes on behind the scenes when you're thinking about creating things. And I feel like traditionally people just think, oh, well, it's just a design firm, it's just a project, it's just like, oh, it's just architecture, just planning. It's like, no, there's so much that goes to it. There's a creative process, but there's so many steps that go on behind the scenes to make it happen, where STEM and creativity just flow, right? So I don't know how many of you all came this afternoon and were thinking, oh, well, insects in biology and architecture and planning is like then shifting into this opportunity that's so much more than what meets the eye. I have a few pairs of Sharina's earrings at home. The butterflies are absolutely amazing. They're my favorite. In different sizes. Some of them are like real big so that I can really call the attention in, and then we've got some really cool glow in the dark ones. They're like little monarchs. Completely amazing. But how you've even taken a practice, a creative practice on the side, which some would call a side hustle, but now you have conservatories calling about wanting to, have your merchandise in in stores and being able to sell that through museums and through conservatories. These are the opportunities that come when creatives can seize the opportunity and take it to the next level, right? Yes, there might be a day job, but there's so much opportunity that's just waiting to be unlocked. And I think New Mexico is such like an exquisite place for that. And then the lowrider art is just, everything's great. Y'all are great. This is very inspiring. For creative industries, I am not necessarily going to talk about some of the like programs and technology that we're working with, but I wanted to talk about a project that's happening for Route 66 Centennial that's happening in Grant, New Mexico, that actually is the result of one of our grantees that we awarded for our business development and expansion grant just last April or May. And the New Mexico Mining Museum actually got selected as part of a Route 66 Centennial project where they're taking, has anybody been to the Mining Museum down in Grants? Yeah, I see a hand. They have this amazing museum that has an underground exhibit where you're walking through basically the mine shaft and seeing the entire process. And they built it and scaled it real life. And what they're doing with that project with the funding from the Creative Industries Division is taking that entire exhibit and turning it into a virtual reality exhibit that they can put online. And it's been selected as part of the Route 66 Centennial project taking place in Grants. And they're doing some really cool things around having to do all the scanning for the spatial awareness, bringing it to life, and really taking this way of maybe people are assuming that folks don't have as much attendance in museums anymore. But when you can take a museum and make the exhibit something that people can experience without having to be there first, it opens up the opportunity for people to experience it and then actually make the change to go. So there's like this beautiful meeting of using current technology, making immersive UX design, and then allowing people to take that journey to actually then get to the museum. So there's this way that they're meeting the old traditional way of doing a museum project in a gallery, in a regular exhibit, and taking the creation to a whole new level where you're kind of present it to an environment digitally, and then be able to help it live on, which is a great way that creatives can take the work that they're doing to meet the future. So your video there at the end, the way they say like this is taking our past and we're meeting it with the future. These are the things that creative economy can do when they're utilized correctly. And just taken to like the next level. I think there's so much space for watching the impossible happen that folks traditionally won't think of if they think that creative economy stops at public mural projects. It's much more involved than that. You've got folks designing airplanes in CAD and then having to paint them and bring them to life. So that's a project that's been doing really great. We're watching really cool things happen there. And then there's also a project in Tucumcari called Art City where they're kind of meeting these huge installation structures out on the Route 66 as they're trying to bring attention and a lot of really interesting things in that realm. And I don't have pictures with me. And there's also New Mexico Main Street and the tourism department have been heavily investing in Route 66 along with New Mexico True, which is part of the tourism grant. But so many of those investments are looking at ways for communities to uplift their heritage and their culture and the things that make them unique, while also tying it to something that's going to be drawing a lot of attention. So New Mexico Main Street has introduced like a passport program. So for folks who are coming in to visit the Route 66, they can travel all along these different places, visit different main streets, and kind of collect their own journey of different amazing things that are happening in New Mexico. And there's just so many examples when you start to frame it as creative economy work, where even though STEM is the predominant piece, creativity is just weaved throughout everything we do, and there's really no way to get away from it.
So unfortunately, there's time for only one question, but I have two questions. And, what I'm going to do is to lump them together. So the last question is actually something that we've been talking about, which is the creative economy and engaging the community. So today is an experiment that the Rainforest is conducting and that all of us are conducting about how we work together to bring an A into STEM, the creative arts into STEM, and make it STEAM, make something happen. And so what I believe is that we conduct experiments that artists and technical people conduct experiments. Sometimes they work, sometimes they fail, and sometimes you get something unexpected. And I actually feel like each time that we have one of these panels, we get something unexpected. And so what I'm going to let each of you do is to comment on, my little riff here about community engagement, creative economy, and the way that you think about experiments and the things that you do in your own work.
No. The thing that comes to mind first, and again, this was a recent experience for me, is my family's background is in the Philippines. And for biologists, I went for the first time with my kids and my husband. We have 80% of the world's coral species in those waters. We have the world's largest eagle and the world's smallest primate. And I just told you about the fireflies, and I got to swim with whale sharks, the largest fish in the world. And as a biologist, I was dying. It was wonderful. And there's this concept that I haven't heard until recently, which is biotourism and ecotourism. And when I think of New Mexico, I don't even think the English equivalent of the word naturaleza, captures the beauty of like the nature of things, right? These New Mexico skies and everything else and all these. So we have that in abundance. I grew up on the East Coast, and I had never seen a lightning storm the way I saw here. And I was humbled. I was humbled by the power of la naturaleza. It was beautiful. It's an uncomfortable intersection to follow that idea with economy for me. I don't know how, because I think of the Philippines and I think if I want to invite everybody to go see that beauty, I don't want it to be overrun by pollution and tourism. It's this delicate balance. But I see an opportunity to share this beauty, this naturaleza, these skies, these mountains, these gorgeous things. I went spelunking under a dormant volcano within my first 3 years here and had a dance class in the lava tube of the volcano. You know how many of my Salcedo friends are so jealous I did that? And that's here, right? That's here. And so I don't know, me in economy, I don't have the vocabulary, but I just feel like we have so much to offer naturally, beautifully, something that is so specifically New Mexico, that if we can do it in a careful way, in small steps, while protecting that naturaleza, that would, right? I don't have the answer of how, but there's that natural cultural history that we have, as well as these beautiful things like low riders and other things, and the mining history, and all the other histories that are specific to New Mexico. So whatever that answer is, let's do it carefully, slowly, conservationally, but also totally uplift. I love what you said. It resonated with me that lowrider art was never seen as fine art. Well, why not? Why not, right? And all these things. I think of like, people think, oh, Paris, Fred, they've elevated the art. That I've been trained in French technique. Why does that one thing and one technique have to be the gold standard for fineness and art? There's so much of it. We have it. I just don't know. I don't know how to bridge these two ideas comfortably.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, it's really interesting, even just in this conversation, to hear and think about creativity in ways that I've never known to think about it, so in work that you're doing it's like, I think I have a very limited window into what I think creativity is, and it's what I've shown, but really then as you're both talking, it's like, yeah, it exists at all different scales, at all different places, all different mediums, and it's really interesting to just kind of borrow from that and understand that a little bit, and really kind of see where maybe the work that I'm doing fits within the larger context of the creative world, which is so much bigger than I think I even recognized. Thinking about how experimentation plays a role in the work that I'm doing, I think it's pretty clear that when you get to the word intersection's been used quite a bit, and it's if we think about a digital lowrider airplane, that feels, in my mind, it's pretty experimental because I'm not sure where it's headed or where I'm going with it, or that sort of thing. And so it's a very exciting place to be doing something that I don't think I had set out to do, but had an opportunity to. And so I think anytime we have the opportunity to find ourselves in that space, it's go for it. And even in the kind of networking that's allowed for that kind of work, I think I was trying to figure out, like, how did I get to this point in that realm? And it's in a lot of ways being a misfit amongst others. Like in the architecture world, I could render, but we can all render. The lowrider world, we can paint, we can put wheels on. In the lowrider world, not a lot of rendering, and vice versa. And so, like, really to embrace the unique traits that we bring, like even just in the conversation, understanding the world of earrings, the world of butterflies, and just like, oh, there's probably something there. I don't know what that could be, but maybe I should model it and render it. I don't know. There's something that how can I visualize what you can see in different ways, and same with you. And it's like kind of embracing that unique space, I think, will allow for that experimentation, and also potentially, create a space of fear of failure. But I think failure is going to be inevitable. And so just recognizing that, seeing it as just a hurdle that has to be passed, and then continuing to move forward, I think is really key. And especially even maybe thinking about failure in a way that if you set an objective and you work towards it, if it's a failure towards that objective, that means maybe it's just a misaligned effort, and maybe it's successful in so many other ways. How do you find potential success and don't dwell on the failure of that? So I think that allows me to continue to think about things in an experimental way.
Your point, I think failure is just a piece of the experimental process, and it's not a bad or a negative piece how we like to interpret it. It's just another way of figuring it out. And I think we'd be hard pressed to say that any of the work we're doing is actually fully refined. I think everyone is constantly in a process of experimentation. A lot of us have formulas down that work and are tried and true, and we continue to model them for different industries. But when we think about the creative economy, I mean, experimentation, creativity, fluidity, these are things that you have to figure it out. And I think for the division, that's something we're doing as well. They gave us industry areas. We've tried to define them into NAICS codes, but NAICS codes don't capture human creativity and creative businesses. Actually, it's too outdated, and it's also too rigid of a structure to truly capture the essence of what it is that folks do and the things and like the intangibles. And I think something that you all both were talking about, which ties really nicely to a piece of the creative industry study that a group of contractors produced for us in 2023, 2024, creative startups, vital spaces, and the Poe Center, is there is this concept of cultural heritage innovation and how we are working, and how in New Mexico, something that's front and center is how do we maintain the pieces of our culture and of our authentic expression while meeting new and innovative technologies without losing ourselves in the face of that. And also thinking about it from a state of data empowerment, data transparency, and also with the sustainability element. And I started thinking about, you were talking about how maybe you've thought about creativity in a few other ways today that you haven't traditionally. And there's a piece of the study that talks about Santa Clara Pueblo won an award on a national level, at a federal level, for an agricultural practice that they were using to do watershed keeping and safe water keeping, where even though on the surface it looks like, well, this is an agricultural project, it has nothing to do with creative industries. It did, because it was a creative process. It was also innate to the stewardship of our indigenous communities, understanding the land and working with it in ways that was intuitive for them, but maybe not so intuitive for the way that we typically find, water and agriculture in New Mexico, especially being one of our scarcest resources. And I think in moving forward, the creative economy presents this opportunity where we get to consider what happens if I look at this a different way, or what happens if I invite someone to the conversation that maybe doesn't have the traditional background of the formulas and the words and the things that I'm used to hearing when I think of STEM. But if you open up that table and invite folks that think just a little bit differently, that's like where the magic happens, right? And that's where we find new innovation and new developments, is it takes that creative spark, and every time we try to put it in a box, which is great when we're trying to make sense of it and then share it out and just make it a little bit more understandable. But in practice, the second that you box it, you're cutting it off from its exponential possibility. So I think continuing to have these conversations and bring folks in, and then you get in front of the right people where you can say, well, we need to steward this carefully. We need to steward it sustainably and responsibly. Because to your point, when I think of like economy, traditionally we go directly to like job growth and capital expenditure and how many people are working and these big numbers, but economy is also something that's intangible, that's happening between people, between place, between cultures. And it's not easy to define and easy to measure. And once we acknowledge that and we broaden the scope of how we're measuring creative and economic growth at a more open level, we start to see the full picture, right? And those are hard things to do when you're talking to finance folks and legislators. They want cold, hard, fast numbers, but creative development and community growth and community engagement aren't things that can always be easily quantified. So we have to be willing to look at them in different ways and just to even feel that. And I think that both of y'all just have a really great way of looking at that and thinking about it. It's been really great to watch the process unfold.
So this is the time for questions from our community. Normally Lisa would cut me off at 1 o'clock, but I think if people have questions, we can take those questions, and the panelists may be available after questions for networking, just one-on-one. Yes.
So being a business advisor within the community and working with a lot of creatives, and my daughter's a digital arts major from UNM, what comes up a lot is the funding aspect, right? So I agree with everything you said with opening your mind to the possibilities, although we don't want it to turn into this big thing, but that big thing is where some of the funding comes from, right? So someone's going to have to pay for this. So along the lines with when it comes to other creatives, based on the opportunities that you have, the reality is there are 1,000 creatives, right? And only few opportunities. Can you give us a few ways on how we can let the community know, the creative community know, that opening their mindset to the potential or the possibilities of charging for their art or producing such ways, you mentioned the word work, job and art, right? How can we do that and express that to the creative community in a way that they can understand that you will still be able to do the thing you love to do, but funding and money will have to play a role to be able to, because the city doesn't have funding to hand 1,000 people and let them do their passion, right? Is there a way that I personally can do that? And also, FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. You never fail, you only learn. So don't ever feel that you fail. Just want to put that out there. Okay.
Who wants to respond?
Perfect for this.
I think the way that we have to approach that, and something that I'm also in the midst of trying to start doing on Saturdays, getting folks to think about how creativity and business can meet. Yes, business can be a little boring and arduous when you get into it, but it's very fun for some people, right? And creative has fun. You're talking about how much fun you're having designing and doing the specs. I've spent so much time doing design work that it is not fun for me. I need to find someone who it lights them up. So when we're talking to creatives about these opportunities, I think being willing to, deal with the red tape that comes along with applying for a grant that's not always fun, or applying for a loan, that it's the same way that we think about creativity as, oh, I'm open to the potential. We have to show creatives that, oh, business and local government, there is a lot of programs there. UNM Rainforest, there is programs there. There is educational programs. There's options at my chamber, at the Arts Council. I didn't realize that I could approach a county to talk about an arts and creative project. I didn't realize that they would be receptive to listening. So on both sides, I think there has to be a willingness to put the heart on the sleeve, because on both sides there is a perceived risk that's not actually there once we get into it. If you have a well thought out project,
Might be the battery. Technology.
I think creatives working together when they're talking about going out for proposals for projects is another really great way to do that. And I also think, there's a lot of workshops and training out there for folks to think about, what does it mean for me to price my art? What does it mean for me to take this to market? We're working with a lot of folks on doing that. So one of the ways we're trying to do that is with some events that we're organizing called NM Creative Con. Our Albuquerque convening will be one where we're offering a lot of workshops around why registering your business matters, how to look at private and public development projects in the creative industries, what's worked and what hasn't. And I think I'm getting away from your question, but I think it's really letting people know that there is an opportunity if they're also willing to look at themselves as a business owner or an entrepreneur, and that they also fit that mold, even though it's not traditional to think of yourself, if you're an artist, as an entrepreneur. It's actually one and the same, because entrepreneurs are doing bootstrapping, trying to figure it out, networking all the time. These are the same challenges that artists face. So even when you have musicians that are looking for gig work, I play in a band on the side, but running that is a whole separate business. There's marketing, there's promoting, there's running rehearsals, there's running the show. There's all these different pieces that when I look at it as an artist, yeah, it's just another gig. But if I look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, there's all these different skills and tools that I'm applying in that way to an artistic practice. And I think it's getting folks to think about and make the connection that, oh, wait a minute, like when you're making earrings, you're doing creative manufacturing, but no one told you to go apply for LEDA, right? But if you were going to actually scale that and do it in a manufacturing facility, that could potentially be a LEDA eligible project. So there's a lot of folks who are dabbling in creativity, furniture making. If you scale that to not just doing it with your hands, but putting it through CAD design and project and from point A to point Z, that's considered creative manufacturing, and it is a business and entrepreneurial process. And I think it's just helping people understand that, yes, this does fit, and then helping them connect to the next steps.
Yeah, and I think connecting to the next steps, if you don't mind, jump off that. I think about it from my perspective and think, it's exciting when all of these opportunities are around. And if I put my architect hat on, there's an ecosystem of architects, and we get together and we talk, and we're all going after the same work. And we all want to do the same thing. And so we're in competition. And then if you shift, and I'm talking with some of the artist colleagues that I have, they're talking about the call for arts and these things. And I think it goes back to the idea of like creativity being a much broader scope of things, and really even looking at the forum that we have here and having the opportunity to have so many varied backgrounds, like even when we went around the room, just recognizing, everything that's represented here is really exciting. And so it's like, is there a way to create some sort of large scale forum that allows you to kind of occupy that space, to allow the smaller creative ecosystems to kind of come together and realize creative work for me that sounds daunting and creative work that sounds terrifying, there's someone that wants to do that work, and how do we start to make those connections? Because I always thought we all wanted to do what I'm trying to do, but that's just the small cohort or the ecosystem that I occupy. And it's like being able to see it at a larger scale and really recognize that other people are interested in either providing funding or to do this type of work or that type of work, really kind of recognize, wow, there could be teams here, and I've just been hanging out with competition. Maybe, I don't know. So kind of, that's how.
Oh, you know, creativity, talk about the airport, taking lowrider, putting it together. I mean, that's a creative merger right there. A lowrider airplane.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's action of what you're all talking about, you know, and taking our culture. And everybody, you say New Mexico, you think Georgia O'Keeffe and lowriders, right?
Yeah.
That's what they think.
I'm Breaking Bad now.
Well, and Breaking, yeah. Well, we even have a blue meth candy. You know? Yeah.
Should we have last word, once it, and then invite people to come up and talk with panelists?
Just as I was listening to everybody, there's a couple of things besides everything we've talked about. Not every city has its own luthier, a person that can make violins, and we have one of the major writers of the Suzuki method. For Suzuki teaches string instruments, piano, right here at UNM. So that string program, incredibly strong. Our flamenco. Our yearly flamenco festival, extremely strong. One of the strongest outside of Spain. How come nobody's like there's a jump? I think we're all talking about these grassroots artists doing grassroots, single, non-scaled up versions of their art. But there's a difference. Benito Bad Bunny, pre-Super Bowl, now hitting the charts and breaking all these records, had the creativity and talent, but then, as you said, team. There's a whole team that made K-pop Demon Hunters the top of the chart, right? Is that music, is that idea, is that concept necessarily 20 times larger than anything that anybody else ever created? No, but it is the team effort, the funding, and all those things before it can come back. You know, how much do they charge per minute on a Super Bowl commercial? If you're talking that kind of economics, it takes that level of industrial teamwork to make a production, right? So I'm talking small scale production. I'm there at my dining table making things, but we're talking large scale stuff, right? So the artists are grassroots, the way I see it. And by the time you start talking about economic development, that's when we need the team, the production, the advertising, and everything else. Because without the advertising and the, there's a commercial on the airline and international spaces, and otherwise the same talent just won't be a scene, right? So I think that's the biggest, the longest connecting line, right? To go from grassroots artists to how do we scale up, and what would we choose to scale up if we were going to put it on a national stage, a world stage? Because my family or the next state over doesn't know that we have the largest flamenco festival outside of Spain. But that's huge to be able to say that, and to be able to say that it started with a grassroots charter school, right? That's so grassroots, and it built, but it took decades to build it. And you guys are nodding your heads like, oh, you didn't know about the flamenco festival. Who would have known outside of here that this is the place to be, or that we have this world-class string program, so much so that one of the Suzuki founders is here as faculty in our own city. Like, we have a lot, and I think what's stopping them from the next level, that national stage, that world stage, is that they're still scrambling for that local funding to get there. That's what I was thinking.
Let's thank the panelists.